that relationship in workplace. So the dynamics of definitions, the dynamics of understanding what constitutes sexual harassment, and the lack of respect for consent, these things constitute some of the biggest issues in workplaces. And at the risk of repeating myself, one of the most common instances is the manifestation of patriarchy from a place of entitlement. It is about power. It is about using that power, and it is about misusing that. So when we work at workplaces, we try to approach all forms and activities that prop up the misogyny. So most colleges that offer the labor, first brush of labor, at least at the first few levels, recruitment starts from a place where students are used to segregation on the basis of gender. You have colleges and universities that segregate their students based on gender. The genders are not allowed to mix. And the binaries of gender are all that's considered. So everything else falls within the gap. Everything else is an egregious failing on the part of the system. We don't have an education. So when you bring young men into the workforce, when you bring young men who've never had the opportunity to understand what the other genders are, but have known their privilege, they are coming right in, importing their privilege and their patriarchy and imposing that. And when you have a system that's constantly reinforcing that it's okay to do that, when you have higher-ups who are busy telling their women to dress a certain way or to smile a little more, those microaggressions feed right into their sense of power. So we try to shift mindsets and we try to make them realize that what they're doing is actually antagonistic to the core value of an individual's personal agency. Sexual harassment goes right against a woman's personal agency, that she chooses to work, that she chooses to go out of the workplace and interact with her colleagues as one would. So we try to work from that space. It's been a very hard climb, to be honest, because when you're sitting in a room, first of all, when you're a young woman, when you're in your 20s and you're sitting in a boardroom trying to speak to the higher ups in the management about sexual harassment, you're not taken seriously. I've been told in boardrooms, "Bachchi hai, kya karegi? Tumhe kya pata? What do you know? You just come out of college. We're just filling a box." And when they approach even a training from that perspective, how do you surmount that wall? So we've resorted to bringing on male allies, men of an older age, to come in to be part of these workshops. And I'd like to say that at times I have personally felt defeated having had to give in to do that. But when I've seen that that's bringing about change, why not?
That's, even when you have to speak about this issue, you have to bring the men to kind of, legitimize something that you have become an expert on and studied. Is this echoing? Yes. So, joining us on the panel is Padma, who has come from Hyderabad. She's worked for several years as a journalist, writing in Telugu. She's now an independent journalist. She joined us also last year in the NWMI meet. So she works in Telangana and she's reported for many years. And there is we have often talked about sexual harassment in the workplace, and that remains as an urban kind of conversation often. So she will bring us bring a perspective of what it is like to work in the regional media space, where you can't even bring up this issue of, forget an ICC, you can't even bring up, that.
అంటే అమ్మాయిలు అన్ఫిట్ పని చేయలేరు, మగవాళ్ళలాగా దూసుకెళ్ళలేరు. ఈవెన్ రిపోర్టింగ్లో అయినప్పటికీ డెస్క్లో కూడా ఎంత పని చేసినా ఈ అమ్మాయికి పని రాదు అని చూపించడానికి చాలా మంది జెంట్స్ చూస్తూ ఉంటారు. ఇప్పుడు ఎవరైనా ఒక అమ్మాయి యాక్టివ్గా ఉంది అంటే ఆటోమేటిక్గా శత్రువు వాళ్ళు భావిస్తారు.
Actually, Padma is not an independent journalist. She works with a newspaper called Nava, Telangana. It's okay. So, what she says is this field, especially in Telugu, I think it's true with many languages, journalism in general. So, people think women are not fit to work in this, even if, not just in reporting, even in desk, people think, you cannot take that kind of work, that amount of work, and you can't do that. And if you are active, really active journalist, they think you are an enemy. They treat you as an enemy. They means men.
అయితే వాళ్ళు ఎట్లా ఉంటుందంటే, ఇన్ఛార్జ్కి కోపం వచ్చింది అనుకో, చివరి నిమిషంలో పేజీ 10 o'clock అయిపోతుంది, ప్రింటింగ్ పంపిస్తాము అని అనుకున్నప్పుడు సడన్గా ఒక ఐటెం ఇస్తారు, ఇచ్చి దీన్ని ఇప్పుడు ఎడిట్ చేసి వెళ్ళాలి అంటే సెక్సువల్ హెరాస్మెంట్ అమ్మాయి ఒప్పుకోలేదు అని అంటే ఆ ఇన్ఛార్జి కానీ లేకపోతే పక్కనున్న ఒక కొలీగ్ కానీ ఏం చేస్తారంటే మీరు బాగా చేయగలరు ఈ పని కాబట్టి మీరు ఇది చేసి ఇచ్చి వెళ్ళండి అంటారు. ఆ టైంలో మనకు 10:30, 11 అవుతుంటుంది, ట్రాన్స్పోర్ట్ ఉండదు, చేసి వెళ్ళాలి. చేయలేదు అంటే అందుకే అమ్మాయిని పెట్టుకుంటే ఈ సమస్యలు ఉంటాయి.
Right, okay. So the harassment is in many ways. This is kind of work harassment. The shifts, if the shift is closing at 10 o'clock, they will give you at the last minute item and they ask you to change and do the item and do it. And it will be like this. They will say because you will do it really good, you have to do it. And if they say no, we can't do because you have to go home, it's already late. In Telugu, none of the organizations provide any transport actually, though they need to provide transport after 9 o'clock, none of them provide. So when they refuse, when they say that they can't do it, that they say okay, that's the reason women should not be in this place.
Okay. అట్లే మనం ఏదైనా ఇంకొకటి లీవ్స్ ఇవ్వరు అమ్మాయిలకి. ఎందుకు అని అంటే నా పర్సనల్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ఇది. వేరే వాళ్ళకి అందరికీ లీవ్స్ ఇస్తారు, లీవ్ ఎప్పుడు ఇవ్వరు అనమాట. ఎందుకని ఇవ్వరు? అందరికి ఇస్తారు కదా, నాకు ఇవ్వరు అని అంటే ఇండైరెక్ట్ వాళ్ళు అనమాట. మీరు కనిపించారు కదా, లీవ్ ఇస్తే, సెలవు ఇస్తే మీరు నాకు కనిపించారు కదా, అందుకని అంటే ప్రపోజ్ చేయడం అనమాట. డైరెక్ట్గా వాళ్ళు హెరాస్ చేస్తున్నారు అని చెప్పడానికి ఉండదు, ప్రూఫ్స్ కూడా ఏం ఉండవు, ఇవన్నీ రికార్డ్ చేయం కదా వెంట.
You all know that how men resort to sexual harassment. This is one very interesting way of doing it. Normally they don't like to give leaves to anyone. Women especially, they don't want to give it. When they ask why, if somebody goes and asks why you are giving leaves to everyone else, why are you not giving to me? Oh, I miss you. If you are not there, how can I see you? It's like flirting. So that's one kind of leave. If you ask for leave, if she demands for leave, they say no, I will miss you. You won't be there. No, I can't see you. So that's one kind.
అది మేనేజ్మెంట్ కమిటీ ఉందండి మాకు సాక్షిలో, అది కమిటీలో రిపోర్ట్ చేయొచ్చు. నిజానికి వేధింపుల నిరోధక కమిటీ అని ఉంది, కానీ ఎక్కడ ఇప్పుడు నవ తెలంగాణలో కూడా కమిటీ ఉంది, కానీ ప్రూఫ్ అడుగుతారు. ఏదైనా అంటే మరి ప్రూఫ్ ఎట్లా చెప్పగలం? ఇక్కడ నవ తెలంగాణలో ఒక అమ్మాయి, అతను చిన్న దారి ఉంటుంది, ఆ దారిలో నుంచి వెళ్ళాలి. స్పెషల్గా అమ్మాయి అతనే ఉన్నప్పుడు ఇలా నడుస్తూ ఉంటాడు, అప్పుడు ప్లేస్ ఉండదు కావాల్సుకొని, అంటే దానికి ఏం ప్రూఫ్ చూపిస్తాము? ఇంకోటి వాళ్ళ క్యాబిన్లో 4 ఉంటారు, ఇద్దరు బయటికి వెళ్ళినప్పుడు అతను అదే పనిగా అమ్మాయిని చూస్తూ ఉంటాడు, దానికి ఏం ప్రూఫ్ చూపించగలం? అయితే వాళ్ళు మేనేజ్మెంట్ చెప్పినప్పుడు ప్రూఫ్ ఏమైనా ఉందా అని అడుగుతారు.
Yeah, actually, okay, I'm adding this. There are not many media organizations are having complaints committee, grievance committee. In the 2 newspapers she worked, there are committees in both the newspapers. But what she says is, when we complain, they ask for a proof. But how can you prove this? She narrates 2 incidents. One, in her office, there is a man there's a small way. One man, whenever the other girl goes, he stands like this, so that she will touch him. If she has to go, it's like no room for her to go. The other one is there are 4 people in the team. When the other 2 people went out went out, if there are only 2 people, he stares at her. So how can I get a proof of it? How can I do that? So how can we do that? We get proofs.
అయితే నవ తెలంగాణలో కూడా ఒక అమ్మాయి ఇట్లాగే అంటే వేరే ఇష్యూలో ఇది అతను హెరాస్ చేస్తున్నాడని చెప్పినప్పుడు కమిటీ మొదట్లో పట్టించుకోలేదు, కానీ అయితే ఎంక్వైరీ చేశారు చుట్టూ, నిజమే అది అన్నప్పుడు ఆ అబ్బాయిని ట్రాన్స్ఫర్ చేశారు అక్కడ నుంచి. సాక్షిలో అయితే అతన్ని ఉద్యోగం నుంచి తీసేశారు. ఎందుకంటే అమ్మాయి అతను మాట్లాడేటప్పుడు రోజు నైట్ మాట్లాడేవాడట. అయితే ఒకరోజు ఈ అమ్మాయి ఇంకా అతను వేరే ఉద్దేశంతో మాట్లాడుతున్నాడు అని అర్థమై కొంచెం ఎంకరేజ్గా మాట్లాడింది అబ్బాయిని. అప్పుడు అతను మనసులో ఉన్నదంతా బయటికి కక్కేస్తే అమ్మాయి రికార్డ్ చేసింది, అందుకని అతని ఉద్యోగం నుంచి చేశారు. అన్ని సందర్భాల్లో ఇది కుదరదు కదా.
బట్ యాక్చువల్లీ యువర్ లక్కీ కన్నా, సీరియస్లీ. So, okay, in those two organizations, those are the two organizations which are having committees which she worked. In none of the other organizations do not have. Okay, she is narrating an incident. In one of the newspapers she worked, there is a colleague who is harassing her all the time, making calls. So one day she has decided to take it up. And what she did is she encouraged him on the phone. So he went on saying things and she recorded and then she submitted. So I don't know, but no, that encouragement may fall back. We really don't know. But in her case it worked because she already complained. And then as a proof she did that. So that's why it worked. In another newspaper she worked is Nava, Telangana. So that's actually CPM run newspaper. So they have the complaint committee. When someone complained, they didn't really took it seriously. But with this pressure, with the pressure from women employees, they took it seriously, and they also took action against the person.
So I'd just like to ask questions to Zana. No questions. I'll just ask. So because you've come back. Okay. So you sit here only, Vanaja. So we don't know when we need you. So one of the things is, because we've come back to that point where we are again frustrated about the things that happen when we complain and the ways in which you're told you're wrong or you imagined it. What have in your advice in many ways that you've dealt, what are the things that an individual complaining can do, or what are the things that the colleagues can do, or what are the things a network like this can do to make this situation better while all the other legal stuff is happening?
I'll tell you one concrete example of what really happened in one of the FM radios. There were about 6 or 7 women employed in this particular FM radio. And there was one male person who was at the helm of affairs. He was very, very close to the person who owned this FM radio. And it's a corporate company, and the corporate company CEO's very close friend was the one who was actually the person in charge of the entire thing. And he was the person who was sexually harassing everybody. If he opens his mouth, it would only be sexually connoted words and other things, and would abuse these girls in a so-called lighter fashion. It's supposed to be a very jovial and whatnot, but the girls were really feeling very, very, they did not relish this. So 2 of them came to me. And they said, ma'am, this is what is happening, his words, his gestures, the way he talks, the way he acts, everything is bad. But we can't go and tell the real boss. The CEO sits elsewhere, one. Secondly, he is a very close friend of this man, so they are not going to believe what we say. And because these girls were only, I think 2 of them were married, all the other 5 or 6 of them, they were unmarried also. And the 2 married ones also were afraid of telling their spouses and getting this back reported to their families. The others were afraid that their future would be affected. And if there's anything the complaint will be known also outside. It was a really situation where we knew that this is happening, and this fellow would, even outside, he would go around, and you all know how you are in this field. They go out for partying, they go out to cover other in women's and all. To all these places, this man would accompany one of the whoever goes as a reporter or whatever it is. And so, what do? None of them also wanted to give it in writing. So, what I did is, I got in touch with his CEO through a friend of his, and then sent an email to him. Before sending an email, what it is, first I got in touch with him, told him there are some problems in your organization, you have to address it. He was not very inclined to address this issue. So what we did is, we got one small recorder, got everything that he spoke in the studio with these people, recorded, and I attached it with a mail that I sent to the CU and told him, I do not want to make this an issue because none of these girls wanted to make it an issue because none of them wanted this to be known outside. But still, I pretended as if everyone was ready and willing to pounce on him and go to the media. But I am refraining them and I am actually holding them back to not put it in the public domain. And I told him, kindly deal with this man, otherwise we'll have to take this issue very seriously. And for these reasons, we also try to put our weight around. We say, we have the entire PUCL with us, we have the entire IDOA behind us, we have the entire journalists behind us, something like this. So immediately, within the 24 hours, this man was removed from service.
Wow.
Fantastic. So there are times when we may have to fight very silently. Don't go immediately pounce and then go anything because none of these girls really wanted to bring to the public domain. They didn't want to tell it out. From the radio this was, but we did this. So we have to devise our own methodologies to deal with these individuals, either with the CEO or with this concerned person. So there are times when we call this concerned person and say, like I told you about this automobile company. They try to tell these fellows, whoever the respondent is, you are going to lose your job, get out of this itself. There are instances where you may get some remedies which may be through other means than the Sexual Harassment Act. I think the bill process. Yes.
Like what? These kinds of
yes.
So one of the things is also that while all of this is what actually women prefer, and that's what this actually the Workplace Harassment Act is supposed to do, where you're not going to get into this whole evidence thing and all of that. And civil redress is what you can get. But clearly, when this is also not working, we are going even more civil redress and doing it in these informal ways. But at the same time, when women are afraid to go to come up and be even anonymously in any way their name being associated with it, there is also a growing or a large group of people who believe that if you name this person,
naming and shaming is there.
Yeah. So when for example, there are many cases like in the media now we know that where they wanted it to be resolved within the organization, but some felt it would be better to shame this person, and then so emails are leaked or such an audio that would be taken would be put out in the media, and these are also reasons why women don't go, and they believe that an FIR and a complaint would be the thing that really punches and
See, I would welcome anyone who is willing to fight, who is willing to give up committee, pursue it with not merely the internal committee, but also the internal committee, but also with the police. I'm actually now in another sexual harassment committee of a public limited company, where public sector company, where with the police, FIR has been registered, and she is also parallelly pursuing the complaint with the Sexual Harassment Committee. So this is a very, very rare instance which I see. That is because her husband is with her, her family is with her. They say, okay, we will be with you, we will try to. The union is with her. So unless the entire union is with her in the and her family supports her, I don't find women coming out in open to prefer a complaint. If you are willing to give a complaint and sustain with it, there's nothing like it. Definitely you can get a conviction, but it's very rare. That's what we find it as. In another public sector concern, there was another case where a lady employee was harassed by her superior. And you know what happened is she prefers a complaint saying that she has been continuously harassed by him in her section. And actually this fellow was in another section and this woman was in one section. They transferred him first or immediately after the complaint, and the transferred position, his seat was much nearer to our section than even the earlier one. This is the sense of proportion which our public sector bosses have. And it went on, the first complaints committee's thing went, he was just warned and then removed from that particular section, put in some other place and all. Thereafter, another time, what he does is, when this lady was actually learning to drive, her husband was teaching her to drive, and when she started driving a little well, he dropped her at one particular junction and said, okay, you drive around all by yourself and come back. And he said that he'll stand in this particular corner. And this woman, when she was driving out, this man was coming in from the opposite side in a two-wheeler, saw her driving, and she was all alone. It was in a it is in a township. It was sort of an isolated place. He drives past his, he confronts her, he parks his motorbike right in front of her. She had to apply sudden brakes. He pulls her out from the car. There was a little manhandling of her also. And she sustained a few injuries. Her chain was broken in the process of he pulling her and all. And immediately, of course, she shouts out the local people, one or two persons who were in the neighborhood. They ran around and they came. She was actually hospitalized also for these many minor wounds, of course, not with anything major. And then the complaint went on. This internal complaints committee, wherein the senior most person of that public sector company was the chairman of the committee, they find truth in the entire proceedings. There was a watch and ward staff of the area who also deposes, saying that as he walked down, he saw that this man went and accosted her, and the entire scene was actually repeated. Despite it, what happens is, this chairperson feels, this man has a family. He has wife and children. If we are going to come take action against him, what happens to his family?
What happens to her family?
This is how things happen. So we had to actually go, the other persons in the internal complaints committee actually met me, and then I had been to the council for something else, and we had to go and meet the CMD, tell him, because the chairman felt that you should not punish him, only warn him and leave him. This was the second time that he was doing it, the major one. So, this is how we women are also not sensitized. We should have people within the committee, and the chairperson should also be persons with some knowledge of feminism, some knowledge of sensitivity about the problems itself. Not your sympathies should not be misplaced, and misplaced sympathies are seem to be generous, seem to be praised. So these are things which I think we'll have to also address, apart from just having our laws in our law books.
A large part of it is also that, before we came on stage, we were speaking. So when people give up on the ICC, they think that maybe they would go to something else, which is the local complaints committee. And you wanted to say something about that, about even knowing what this is. First, can you tell us, maybe people don't know what the local complaints committee is, and whether that is accessible?
But before I go to that, I'd just like to allude to something that the both of them said. See, if you listen to everything that they talked about, you can see the tremendous onus on the survivor. Whether it is to prove or to get up and talk about what's happened, there's such a big burden on the survivor. And I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, you being the lawyer, I don't think that the notion of the burden of proof as it applies in a murder case should be imported over here. I think we need to reverse the equation a little bit. Let the burden of proof be on the perpetrator or the offender or the accused to show that he didn't do it. Because why is it on me to record every microaggression and then to find innovative ways to record microaggressions? Again, that goes down to how we're defining sexual harassment. Now, we have a habit of really connoting sexual harassment or the term sexual violence with the overt. Now, that fisticuff was taken into account because you had a CCTV footage. You had the other lady having injuries here, which is evidence. But what about instances like this when a man just stands up to block your way? Now, that's not going to cause you the kind of bodily harm, but it's irritating you, it's affecting you. So, why are we calling why are we alluding to the singular definition of what's sexual violence? Why can't we also include within sexual harassment gender-based harassment, sexualized violence, which is any form of microaggression or violence that's used because of your sex, your identity as a woman. So we need to start looking at the definition from a wider angle, and we also need to shift the onus tremendously. And because this is a civil legislation, I mean, in India, the Domestic Violence Act is also a civil legislation. We don't take violence against women seriously.
Actually, no, I've had funny instances. There's an instance where there was a complaint to a sexual harassment committee where we found that the boss had actually stuck newspapers on his glass panes of his cabin, so that whatever he does inside or talks whenever he advances with his women would not be seen out. Actually, it was a transparent cabin that he was given, but two or three of the employees, the managerial employees, they actually stuck newspapers around so that nobody can see what's happening inside. So these are things which have to be addressed. Yes, we did say that. Yeah, that's how we shift the burden to an extent. So he'll have to show why he did this. That she proving that this happened.
So going back to what you talked about, the local complaints committee. So of course every establishment, every workplace with 10 or more employees is obliged to constitute an internal complaints committee. But you also at the district level have what's called as the local complaints committee, which for all intents and purposes is similar in constitution. You do have the experts, you do have staff members who are expected to take cognizance of cases and address them. But recently, as Nan had also pointed out, the Supreme Court actually rapped the knuckles of most of the states asking for a report on whether there are local complaints committees, if they are functioning, if there is any information available on them. For blue-collar workers, for those whose internal complaint committees don't exist or fail them, I think this is one source of recourse. This is one avenue that they can go to. Or, of course, go directly to the court, like the young lady that ma'am had talked about, and pursue a criminal petition as well. But we don't have any authority that is vested with the duty of educating people about this. The fact that a blue-collar worker does not know that she has a right to not be sexually harassed at the workplace, that she has a right to talk about it, that she has a right to seek recourse and seek justice to ensure that she is not in such a situation. And that vulnerability of a blue-collar worker is tremendously exploited. Especially because they also come, I mean, we need to add a little bit of an intersectional approach to understanding what a blue-collar worker goes through. The caste angle comes into play, her economic status comes into play, her status perhaps as a single mother in most instances, or at least a single providing earner in her family when a drunk husband is taking away her income. Now these factors are what that power or privilege plays on. Sexual harassment, these women really need to be brought to the forefront as well. We do have a bit of an urban understanding of certain terms and an urban application of certain terms, but it's also when we are involved in these places as workforces, and only at that point that we understand how much of a glut there is as well. So I think somewhere in the line we need to address that.
So in terms of this blue-collar workers, and this is something that even media does, where when even the boss is appraised, even through an anonymous letter or something of some kind of sexual harassment or a discomfort even, and some women just get together and write an anonymous letter, it goes, and then when I once reported on the garment sector, garment workers, they did this in a company and the boss said, of course I dealt with it, we have an ICC, but the lady has not been coming. So I called him to my cabin and I said, you speak to me openly, and I said, you tell me everything, and I called him, I have an open door policy, anybody can come in and tell me. So when I told him that it's not your job, they cannot probably speak to you, maybe it is you, I didn't know in that case, so maybe they are so afraid, but they don't, so is it this kind of informal ways in which people who believe themselves to be feminist, like this man, the chairperson who thought that I understand that, let's give him a warning, like you are somebody who just did a small thing, a bad mistake for a moment. So when these informal setups are there, is there some way that, I mean, this is not legally, this is the reconciliation that you're talking about, is there some way that the colleagues or others who are not actually affected can come in and interfere? Is there something you can do where these informal setups don't actually happen?
See, I don't think we can ever do away with these informal setups at all, at least in the near future. We will have such informal setups because even before we prepare a complaint, the complainant also tries to build up sort of a base in the ground with which, through which she gets a few people at least to help her. So it is very essential that women as a group join together, don't indulge in gossiping, but try to be sympathetic to give a patient hearing to whoever has got a complaint and encourage the complainant to give a written complaint. I feel the informal forms of going to a HR and reporting or to your manager or to somebody else in the organization is a must to also seek some sort of a support for herself to talk about this itself, because not many women are equipped enough or bold enough to come out and prepare a complaint on their own. So we need that support system, which can't be formal, which will not be also very formal. We need informal situations also. Such informal support system should be more sympathetic towards her to help her. And that is how I've always seen women gathering courage. The complainant, the victim woman gathers courage only through such informal setups. Unless you have others coming and telling, okay, I will come and talk to you, talk to the for you. I'll be with you when you give your complaint. I'll also depose for you. Unless you have that sort of a support, nobody will ever go to give a complaint.
I think we can open up everyone has questions. We'll start with Vanaja since she's right here and she said she has a question.
Yeah, okay. I think there's this confusion about sexual harassment and workplace harassment. Recently we had a consultation in Hyderabad where the women collectors were called. All those collectors was, even young women collectors, they were saying it's very difficult for a woman to come out and say. And at the end, out of the all complaints, we received 50% of fake. I said, I actually went and confronted. How can you say it's fake? Then they were like, they were taken aback and they said, it's actually not sexual harassment, it is workplace harassment, it's different. So it's like what they say is it's about the, not giving promotions, not giving proper work, not transferring to some areas. That doesn't come under sexual harassment, but people are bringing that into sexual harassment. That's what she says. So I think there's that confusion so much. So
at the end of the day, it's about documenting the instances that come to you, right? Like for instance, like ma'am said, when somebody comes up with a complaint, you're busy trying to quell the complaint instead of really chasing it and documenting it. Now, if you have all the evidence, now being denied a promotion or being denied a certain kind of a work assignment because of your gender is sexual harassment. As simple and straightforward as that.
If it's not because of gender, then it would not be.
It is not. So that's the thing. Now, that's exactly what I was alluding to. Now, there need not be a sexual element to the violence targeting a woman or a trans person in a workforce. The idea is that they are being targeted because of their gender or sex identity, and they are being denied something or being forced to do something or endure something because of that.
But the law is not clear on that, right?
So, whose fault is that? Ours, right? We are not questioning that. We are not questioning that. The people who see this as a problem are not chasing after the lawmakers to do that, to make the change, or at least to implement it in a way that's benefiting the one that's suffering as a consequence. You have something called the rule of beneficial construction. Legislations like these are supposed to be for the benefit of the community. So you have to, if the lawmaker has not done it, if we are not chasing after them to make a change, then beneficially, at least implement the law in a beneficial fashion. That's exactly why we're feeling it's a patriarchal tool in the hands of a patriarchal system, and it's being used in a patriarchal fashion.
And the thing about the workplace, it's workplace discrimination based on identity-based workplace discrimination.
Rohini, Ammo has.
Yeah, we have. I'll just pass the mic around.
Can we get another mic? Yeah, we do have.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions on basically what has come up.
what has come up. One is this, Kirthi, you said about civil law and then domestic violence is weak because it's a civil law. But the women's movement has actually chosen to, these are laws on which the women's movement has actually worked, and they've chosen to make it civil for certain reasons. So I think I'll leave that to Lakshmi to clarify further. But the other thing is, you said there's no onus on anybody. I thought the sexual harassment law actually puts the onus on the employers to inform everybody that they do. So it's part of the law. And then two questions which I would like Mr. Ramalingam also to help us with. One is, I don't know if you've heard the case of Mahesh Murthy, venture capitalist, who's been serial abuser for many years. But whether he's a venture capitalist and he's meeting startup women who are in the startup industry, and therefore they're not technically working for him, but they are contacting him about work and about funds and things. And he's been anyway, now finally there's an FIR against him because one woman has finally, through the National Commission for Women. So this whole thing of definition of workplace harassment, if you're not actually employed in the same organization, does it still come under that? That's one thing. And then the other thing is, I was talking to you earlier about this particular journalist in Goa who has been, again, a serial abuser. And finally, because the union, the journalist union in Goa actually has worked very hard to get about 6 women to file FIRs against him and everything. And so they have, they filed FIRs, they have the support of the union and everything, but nothing has happened, and we have issued statements, everything, but this guy is still roaming around, and now obviously according to a post on our Facebook page today, he's still trying to approach all kinds of women for further opportunities for harassment. So I think, what do you do when there's somebody, whether it's his employers or whether it's the government, because he keeps getting accreditation to important government functions, etc., because despite the fact that there are 6 police complaints against him. So what does one do in those kinds of... And the union is also really trying to pursue this. I mean, every time he gets accreditation, the union writes to the accrediting agency saying, look, this guy is... But nothing happens. Complete impunity.
I'll just clarify and then pass it on to Ma'am. So just to start with, while I agree that the women's movement did choose to make the domestic violence legislation civil for all intents and purposes, what I was trying to make the point for was that those in charge are not taking sexual violence seriously. Because for them, it's like it's still a civil legislation, nothing's going to happen to me. So the perpetrators are not taking it seriously. There is no deterrence for them. And coming to the onus, so there is an onus, there is a legislative obligation and they can be fined. But what I was trying to say was there is no sense of accountability. They don't feel that they are obliged to do it in a qualitative fashion. There's a bit of checking boxes and they feel that they've completed a training regardless of whether that training is percolated or not.
Even as we say that the Domestic Violence Act is a civil act, but still the courts do not recognize it as a civil act. My petition for transfer of the Domestic Violence Act from the Hyderabad Magistrate Court to the High Court, to the Family Court, wherein other matrimonial matters are pending, was dismissed. Earlier they used to allow it, the transfer petitions from the civil side. Now they say go to the criminal side because it's criminal. So the courts are themselves confused about whether it is really civil or criminal. There are judgments which say it is quasi-civil, like the CRPC, it's a 125 CRPC. This also is considered to be a civil law with jurisdiction for disposal given to the magistrate for early disposal. But this early disposal itself is also funny. The Act speaks about 60 days time for disposal of cases, but the courts would give you at least 30 days adjournment. The matters are pending for 2 years and more. So what is in paper is very different different from what actually the ground realities are. So we'll have to not be thinking about the nuances of what is there here, but we'll have to work towards getting these remedies practically as fast as possible. When you say that somebody is scot-free, I, as a women's rights activist, would feel, why is bail being granted? But I, as a human rights activist, would feel bail and not jail should be the rule. So there is a contradiction within ourselves itself about whether a person should be blamed and ostracized before conviction, which is definitely unfair in a civil society. So we will have to ensure that there is speedy justice. Ensure that any complaint preferred should be taken on file as soon as possible, complaints be inquired into as soon as possible, and investigation be over as soon as possible, verdict given as soon as possible, and make the person, if it is going to be in the criminal law, if it is going to be a police which is prosecuting, ensure that there is conviction. If it is going to be before the sexual harassment committee, ensure that you give a finding to the management, asking them to take immediate action, recommend for immediate action, finding the person guilty or otherwise. So speedy justice is something which is very, very important.
No, if Sudha ma'am is leaving, I'd just quickly like to ask a question. This whole thing about civil and criminal, I think we need to have a discussion really, because it's not like civil is any lesser than criminal. And the idea of having civil was to change the atmosphere in workplaces and media houses. Because more and more we are finding anybody who files a complaint is almost forced out of the organization. Very difficult to continue working in the same place. And that's totally not the intention of the act. So even microaggression, what you named, standing in a certain way and being aggressive, I think those have to be addressed by preventive measures, workshops, talking, dialogue, all of that, rather than putting everything under a definition of what can you complain against. I think it needs to be an atmosphere change rather than only looking at it as complaint redress. But my specific question to you, ma'am, is about defamation. Increasing the impact even on our NWMI list, somebody brought up this question about she's compiling stories of survivors. So can one name a person in a complaint without it being formally lodged? Number one, is there any likelihood of defamation against that website? If you're carrying stories of survivors which are actually complaints and naming people, what is the liability to media houses who do that?
For any truth is defense. If whatever you publish is true, then if you can prove that it is truth, then you can go scot-free. Otherwise, you will have to face the music.
No, but right now, for example, the example Ammu gave, he's filed defamation.
The person against whom the complaint is made, the case is filed, the accused will have to prove what was true. So you can't actually go about indulging in a blame game without factual backup. If it is really untrue, what will you do? If it was made up, I have also dealt with a number of cases where just because the union had a problem with the management, they have actually for a false complaint. I've also done that. So there are instances, it's not that all women are honest to the core, which I believed earlier. I thought all women were right. But I have, during the course of my experience, also found that not all of us are honest. We are being manipulated, or we are being made, we are made an instrument in the hands of somebody who wants to take some revenge against somebody else, for whatever reason it is. So not all women are angels. We can't also encourage anything which is not factual.
No, but how, as journalists, can one do an inquiry before?
Yes, unless you do it, unless you are intrinsically satisfied, you ought not to be publishing it, is it not?
It's a very tricky question, actually.
Any person is deemed innocent and proved guilty.
Defamation truth is not a defense. in defamation, criminal defamation. But in any case, but I have a question for Sudha ma'am, please. There are one or two things actually about what you said about false complaints. The Act actually has a provision where it penalizes any kind of false complaint.
Yeah, she said.
Now we've had a situation in Nava at times where this internal complaints committee went through the whole process, held the journalist who complained guilty for a very similar kind of microaggression that she was talking about this kind of staring and all of that, and it became quite a major issue. Finally, in the findings, they said, we are not penalizing you under this false complaint charge, that is section 18 or something, because we are taking we are being sympathetic towards you. But we can do that if you go further. Now this girl wants to file an appeal, and she's not filing the appeal because she's worried that if she pushes it further, they will charge her with a false complaint because they have not upheld her complaint, her original complaint. So basically my point is that, like Lakshmi also said, there are several scenarios, and what we are realizing with the number of cases that are coming up, whether it's in the corporate world or in the media or anywhere else, that one size does not fit all. So what you earlier said about this this problem of taking non-legal measures, I think was very useful, because that does exist. We can do that. We can take non-legal measures. My question to you is, where does one go to file an appeal? The Act does not have any provision.
It has a provision.
We are not able to find it.
It speaks about appeal, but it is not.
Where?
Yeah,
with the labor commissioners.
Yeah, you can go to. I suppose you can go to the management and itself ask them to set up a
check the Act.
Yeah, it speaks about appeal. It is not. It doesn't say where. You are right. You are right. It speaks about appeal, does not specify where. So there you will have to have a notification about who. There is no appellate authority as such in this Act. You are right about it. But I suppose if you are really serious about anything, you prefer a police complaint and pursue it as a criminal complaint, which is parallelly it can be done, is it not? So, and only the criminal complaint has got teeth. It can bite. This does not have a real bite.
When a complaint was filed with the police, counter complaint has been filed against.
Yeah, you can always defend it and also prosecute.
It's a mess. It's become a mess.
I have something quickly to ask Sudha ma'am. Actually, I think as far as journalists are concerned, the scope and the ambit of the definition of this very term workplace is very limited, I think. I mean, like, as reporters, what exactly is our workplace? When we go to a certain place and we work there and somebody is doing this thing to us, whether it would come under this definition of the workplace harassment or not. I mean, this is applicable not only for women working in the media, like in the very recent incident, the infamous incident of an actress being abducted and raped in Kerala. Actually, the discussion among the feminist groups in Kerala was it should be considered as a workplace harassment, and whoever is the producer of the movie or whoever should be responsible for that, should be held responsible because she was on the way back home from her shooting location in the car which is arranged by the producer or whoever, the manager or whoever. So that is a case of workplace harassment as far as I'm concerned. And also we have a couple of incidents in Kerala in which a very young junior reporter, television reporter was, when she went to interview a union minister, he made some sexually colored remarks on her, and it happened in a government guest house. So whether it would come under this workplace harassment or not, I think these are some issues that we have to deal with.
Yeah, any place with your workplace would not be confined to only the four walls of your factory or your office or your the place where you are actually situated, your office is situated. It would definitely extend. It could even be the farm for a farming lady, a person who is an agriculturist. So you need not confine it to only the place where the desk where you are.
Yeah, but whether the act gives that scope.
Yeah, does the act allow that to be done? Okay. I also wanted to add that there are also increasingly in the media people who are you have to run this. People who are journalists who are not ever coming to the office, like they are freelancers or they are part-timers, but you are dealing with editors on the phone and things like that. So they often feel like, oh, I'm not in this organization, I don't even have a contract, and you're saying you can. Anita.
Yeah. Just 3 quick questions on problems that we are facing in dealing with sexual harassment. One is with the blue-collared workers, mainly garment workers that I've been working with.
Turn it on, no?
Sorry.
See, I'll just read this out. Workplace would mean any department, organization, undertaking, establishment, enterprise, institution, office, branch or unit which is established, owned, controlled or wholly or substantially financed by funds provided directly or indirectly by the appropriate government or the local authority or a government company or a corporation or a cooperative society, so on and so forth, hospitals, nursing homes, blah blah, everything. And it also says any place visited by the employee arising out of or during the course of employment, including transportation provided by the employer for undertaking such journey, a dwelling place or a house. So all these are workplaces, okay?
Yeah.
There is a supplementary judicial decision as well that expanded the scope of the workplace. I forget the name of the decision, but they extended it to text messages, emails, letters, all of that.
I have 3 small parts of the question. One was when a person is complaining, and we actually had one garment worker making a police complaint because she tried dealing with the HR and did not get to the ICC. But when she made the complaint in the police station, the management took it as an excuse as not to give her the leave that was available, that would be available if she had gone through this committee. Like, you haven't made a complaint officially to the ICC, so you're not eligible for that relief measure that is part of the Act, which says that if you are in a position of, if you're feeling stressed or you're feeling threatened, you can take up to 3 months leave. That was not granted to her. That was one area, if there is any legal recourse for that. The other that we are facing in Bangalore, in Karnataka, is that the LCCs have been set up, but there is no department that is pinned down with the duty of taking these reports. So when you have, on one hand, we have a lot of activity generated in the factories. Everybody technically has in writing an ICC in place with 5 names on it. Somewhere in the premises, those 5 names are put up. So the legal requirement is met. There are no complaints in the books, not one complaint that is registered. And if we put in an RTI asking for reports, the Women's Commission, the Labour and the Women and Child, all 3, none of them have decided who actually is going to take these reports, which the companies are supposed to give. So the companies are supposed to file an annual report on the functioning of the ICCs. So there is no one department we can pin and ask how many reports you get, what action you have taken. That's one problem that we are facing. The third is that due to compliance activities that have been generated in the companies, there is a lot of training going on. Technically you have 10 managerial trainings, 10 trainings for workers, but what is being shared in these trainings is very suspect and very, the worker has no agency in it. In the sense of, are the unions involved? Never. Especially in the garment sector and in most other companies, it's either NGOs or companies that have been set up to do training. And if you look at this, in few sectors, there is one NGO which has got the contract, or one person who is that external, who is very management friendly, and that is the reason why they are everywhere. And they are doing the trainings, and compliance is being met everywhere.
So these 3 areas for the samosa and tea.
Yeah. Samosa and tea.
You have to ensure that through the media to expose these people. Otherwise, you can't do anything at all. Because the complaints committee can only insist that there is an NGO or a person who is exercised in dealing with women's issues. But to supervise these people, we need to do an audit, ensure that such expose these institutions. Unless you expose these institutions, you are not going to get anything much. I have found that even within the court premises itself, it took a long time. After Vishaka, they did not set up only after this act that we got this act. Actually, before this act came up, there was an informal committee which was set up much later. But any complaint of sexual harassment was definitely not taken up seriously. Another thing is, I find that almost all institutions, including the courts, when you start preferring a complaint, they don't see this as a victim preferring a complaint against an accused or a respondent. They see it as bringing down the reputation of the institution. So that is why they feel that there should be a full stop, create a silence to this entire process. Because they think, everyone wants to say, another government department, in a very, very scientific department of the central government, when I was called for one of the sensitization things, the first thing they were very happy to tell is, we have on board more than some 400, 500 employees, women employees, but not a single complaint of sexual harassment. So they were so happy about it. But I personally know at least one criminal case filed with relation to a sexual harassment of a management staff on a sub-staff. So, but they were blissfully ignorant of that fact. That was only an IPC complaint. So that was not before the internal complaints committee. So this is how the institutions work. I think we'll have to constantly do our advocacy work and also use your
media exposures also has been that one organization CEO saying, I do want these things to come out, I do believe that this stuff come out, but if the story comes out, although I'm doing, when the person is filed the ICC, I'm doing everything, my company's name is out there as the person who has a harassment case in their company. Although, even though I've solved the issue and I fired the guy and everything, I will always be in the company, that anxiety of, even though I've done the right thing, so they like to come out at all. So when we even want to report, they're sort of like, I don't want to tell you my positive stories, go away. Ananya,
yeah. I'm from Calcutta. I've been on several sexual harassment complaint committees myself, and my experience is that sexual harassment complaints committees only work when the organization itself is gender sensitive. I have been on sexual harassment committees where we have actually found the person guilty. We have given that verdict, and then overnight they have changed the committee. So I found myself out of the committee. They put in a brand new committee. So it's largely that. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention about LCC is that I think it's for all of us to know that LCC also functions not only for the unorganized sector, but also in the organized sector when the complaint is against a very senior person in the organization and it is felt that it will be difficult for the victim to get a fair thing. So therefore they can refer it to the LCC, and I was actually the head of the LCC for some time, for 1 year. So we actually handled quite a few cases there.
Malini has a question. Ananya, can you pass the mic to me?
Very simple one. I want to know how internal is internal complaints committee? In the sense that often they do not come out openly with what the actual report is all about, and I do not know whether it is possible to access these through an RTI. And in fact, in one particular case within the police department, when I pursued it, they said that look, it's an internal complaints committee, we cannot share it with you. And if you do quote, that will be a violation of our, and almost threatening me that that could be taken up against you. And today, the person who was complained against, the internal complaints committee also did not make recommendations. So it's for the department head to actually interpret how it's being said. And because there was no clear recommendation, they felt that he's not guilty and therefore got promoted also. So I just want to know how internal can this be, and can it be accessed through RTI? And
I find myself the same as you. To be honest, it is not something we can access through an RTI apparently, because I've tried. So this is the reason why, the context to why I'm in a similar position is because we're trying to come out with a blockchain technology-based reporting system. For those that are on initiative, blockchain allows you to create a database that cannot be tampered with and can be viewed by the public with redaction of the personal identity of the individuals involved. So the idea is to be able to facilitate access to outsiders on data on the number of complaints that have been filed, what action has been taken on these complaints, and what has happened as a consequence of the complaint for the complainant herself. So that is something I'm working on in progress to basically deal with exactly the same quandary you find yourself in. Most often, the internal complaints committees are on paper. You have certain authorities. But many a time, quite like what Ms. Ananya mentioned, they are ad hoc. So it's very easy to just completely change the dynamics of who's on that committee. So, yeah.
Sudha has to leave, so your final comment.
I actually want to thank all of you. It was really an interactive session where I also learned things from your perspective. Today is a working day for the court, and I have one case to attend to. That's why I'm just leaving. I'm really sorry. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for your perspective. We'll continue. This is a token of Then might leave.
Okay, I will.
Anyway, Padma, you had something to add.
సాక్షిలో నాకు అతను నువ్వు కనిపించకపోతే లేదు సెలవే. ఆ తర్వాత నుంచి నాకు అతని ఉద్దేశం ఏంటో అర్థమైనాక నేను దూరం ఉండడం మొదలుపెట్టాను ఆయనకి. ఆయన క్యాబిన్ ముందరే నాది సీట్ ఉంటుంది, వచ్చి నా వెనకాల ఉండి అందరి కామెంట్స్ చాలాసేపు నిలబడేవాడు. అందుకని నేను సీట్ మార్చాను. అసలుకి సీట్ మార్చినప్పుడు ఇన్ఛార్జి చెప్పాల్సిన అవసరం ఉండదు. చాలామంది వాళ్ళకి ఇష్టమైన చోట్లకు మారుస్తారు. నేను మార్చినప్పుడు చాలా పెద్ద గొడవ చెప్పాను. ఆ తర్వాత నేను సరే ఇంకొక డిప్యూటీ ఎడిటర్ దగ్గరికి వెళ్ళి చెప్పాను. ఆయన సేమిది, ఆయన పెళ్ళిడికి వచ్చిన కూతురు ఉంది, నేను సింగిల్ ఉంది, పెళ్ళిడికి వచ్చిన కూతురు ఉన్నది, ఆయన అట్లా ఎందుకు చేస్తాడు అంటే ఇప్పటి వరకు జరుగుతున్న అత్యాచారాలన్నీ పెళ్ళి పిల్లలున్న వాళ్ళు భార్యలున్న వాళ్ళు చేయడం లేదా, పెళ్ళి కాని వాళ్ళే చేస్తున్నారా? డిప్యూటీ ఎడిటర్ కాబట్టి నేనేం మాట్లాడలేదు, వచ్చేసాను. తర్వాత నన్ను ఎంత హెరాస్ చేయడం మొదలుపెట్టారంటే సెలవు ఇచ్చి కూడా రమ్మని పిలిచేవాడు. నేను ఒకసారి రెస్పాండ్ అవ్వలేదు, ఇట్లా పిలుస్తున్నాడు కదా అని. ఈమె అసలుకి ఇష్టం వచ్చినట్టు సెలవులు పెట్టుకుంటుందని 8 వరకు కంప్లైంట్ అయింది. దాంతో ఇంక్రిమెంట్స్ ఉండవు. అంటే ఇదంతా కూడా అతని ఉద్దేశంలో భాగంగా జరుగుతుంది, కానీ వర్క్లో భాగంగా చూపిస్తారు దాన్ని.
I think she was saying regarding the person, whenever she asks for a leave, he says that no, I can't see you. Like, if you go on leave, I can't see you. So I can't give you leave. So it happened to her actually. Yeah, that happened to her. That person used to stand behind her seat and used to make all the remarks, so that he will be close to her, like just intimidating by saying things about everything and making comments, standing behind her. Then she changed her seat on her own. So normally in that office, people change their seats according to their own will, but in her case, he made a complaint. So then she went and explained to a senior deputy editor that this guy is harassing me like that, this man is doing it like that. then the deputy editor said, no, that man has a daughter who is almost elder daughter who is yet to be married. So a person like him, why will he do?
Yeah.
Then her question is, people, all those people who are committing rapes also are not married. They are married people also rapes, right? So that's why she asked. But then
frustrating,
yeah, or when she went on leave, she would call her back to the office. When she doesn't come back, he will go and complain again that this woman is going on leaves all the time, and she's a single, so more vulnerable.
ఇంకోటి రాత్రి 12 గంటలకి 1 గంట కూడా ఫోన్ చేసి నీ దాంట్లో ఈ తప్పు వచ్చింది అనేవాడు. అంటే నాకు ప్రతిరోజు టెన్షన్ ఉండదు, నేనేం చేశాను ఏంటి అందుకని పేపర్ తీసుకొని వెళ్ళేదాన్ని అనమాట వెంట. అయితే ఇట్లా 1 గంటకు ఫోన్ చేయడం ఏంటంటే తప్పు ఉంది కదా అని. అది నాకు ఎంత భయం ఉన్నదంటే పార్టీసీలు ఉంటుంది, అందులో రోజు పేపర్ చూస్తారు కదా, నా పేరుని ఇద్దరు చూసేవాళ్ళు. చూసి ఈవెన్ చిన్న రిమార్క్ ఉన్నా అందులో నా పేరు అంటే ఫలానా సబ్ ఎడిటర్ ఇది తప్పు వచ్చింది, ఈవెన్ టీడీపీ అంటే టీకి దీనిలో లేదనుకో, చిన్న మిస్టేక్ వచ్చిన కామా పెట్టాల్సిన చోట పెట్టలేదనుకో, అవన్నీ నా మీద కంప్లైంట్స్గా రికార్డ్ అవుతుంది. నా పేజీని ఇద్దరు చూసేవాళ్ళు పాలిటిక్స్లో. కంప్లైంట్ చేయలేదు, అయితే బ్యూరో చీఫ్ దగ్గరికి అంటే డిప్యూటీ ఎడిటర్ చేశాను కంప్లైంట్ చేయలేదు. అయితే చీఫ్ లేదు నేను చెప్తాను, ఇంకా ఇవి కంప్లైంట్ చేయడానికి నా ఉద్యోగం నాకు నేను వెళ్ళేలాగా ఏం చేశారంటే నా పేజీలో అది ఏంటంటే నేను పెట్టలేదు, నేను పేజీకి ప్రింటింగ్ పంపించేసి వచ్చాను, రివైజ్ చేసి అందులో అవి పెట్టాను. అది నేను ఎట్లా నా దాంట్లో అందులో వైఎస్ జగన్ ఐటెంలో అట్లాంటి వాటిల్లో చాలా కేరింగ్గా ఉంటాము. నేను ఆ పేపర్ రోజు తీసుకొని వెళ్తాను కదా, అందుకని నాకు మీరు మొత్తము అది మరి పోస్ట్ చేయడం.
So actually he was harassing her sexually, but showing it as a workplace thing, because she is going on leaves and that. But she knows that this is a sexual harassment. What he was doing is he would call it 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the midnight and ask that there is a mistake in her page. So she's in charge of a couple of pages, so he would call and tell her that there is a mistake. And every day she would go home with that fear and anxiety that he would call and he would say things. And every mistake, in newspapers we know a lot of mistakes, but every mistake of her is being recorded and sent to the editor. And one day when she put the page and she came back, she works with the YSR Jagan's, that was the Jagan's newspaper. So Sakshi. So one news item which is about Jagan, something related to Jagan, they changed one of the words into very foul language. They changed after she left. So they changed it and then they very issue that she wrote that.
ఇంకా అట్లా వచ్చింది. ఇంకొకసారి కూడా అట్లాగే ఏంటి అంటే రిపోర్టర్స్కి ఫోన్ నెంబర్ ఇస్తాము, ఏమైనా మీకు సమస్యలు ఉంటే కనుక దీన్ని చెప్పండి. అది మా ఇన్ఛార్జి ప్రతి పేజీలో వాళ్ళు పెట్టించింది, మేము పెట్టింది కాదు. రోజు మిగతా ఐటమ్స్ అన్నీ కూడా డిలీట్ చేస్తాము, అది ఉంటుంది ఐటమ్స్ రోజు పెడతామన్నమాట, పెట్టిస్తాము. అందులో ఒకరోజు తప్పు పెట్టారు, అది నేను చూసుకోలేదు, మేము చూసుకోం కదా, అది ఇన్ఛార్జి పెట్టించింది. ఒక 15 రోజులు దీని తర్వాత వైఎస్ జగన్ ఐటమ్ తర్వాత 15 రోజులు కంటిన్యూగా తప్పు వచ్చింది, మళ్ళీ కంప్లైంట్ అనమాట. అయితే ఎందుకు వచ్చింది మరి, నేను మధ్యలో 2 లీవ్స్ వీక్లీ ఆఫ్లో వచ్చినాయి చూశాను, ఆ రోజు కరెక్ట్ ఉంది. దానివల్ల నేను చేయలేదని నేను నిరూపించగలుగుతున్నాను, కానీ ఎవరు చేశారు అనేది నేను నిరూపించలేకపోయాను. ఇంకా ఈ టెన్షన్స్ భరించలేక నేను ఆ ఉద్యోగాన్ని వదిలేశాను.
Okay, so it's like that person was actually behind her and after her. Like, so every newspaper, every page has a template. Like you all know, in that template there's a phone number which is listed there every day, but someone changed that number. They put a wrong number, which she didn't realize because they take the template and put the content. They don't change the template, right? So and they ran it for 15 days. And then made a complaint against her that she changed it, she put a wrong number. So they all sent to the editor. When the deputy editor was saying that elderly man won't do, and she she had to quit the job and she quit the job. ఎందుకు
అంటే ఇప్పుడు నేను కంప్లైంట్ చేస్తే ఇవన్నీ నా వర్క్లో భాగంగా చూపిస్తున్నారు. ఇవి పని చేయలేక అతని మీద కంప్లైంట్ చేస్తుంది.
So no, because the environment is such that people were all saying that it's about her work, not about the sexual thing. It's they're trying to portray it as her incapability or something. So that's the reason she doesn't want to go through it and she quit it.
मेरा नाम जयंती है, मलकानगिरी उड़ीसा से हूँ. तो मलकानगिरी उड़ीसा से हूँ. मैं जेंडर जो सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट सभी के बारे में जो बोल रहे हैं उसमें मैं कुछ कहना चाहती हूँ. मेरा मीडिया में ज़्यादा लंबा सफर नहीं है, 3 साल हुआ है मैं यहाँ पे दिल्ली में. तो उसी के बाद ही मैं जेंडर क्या है उसमें सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट सारी चीज़ों के ऊपर मुझे कुछ भी नॉलेज नहीं था, क्योंकि मैं जिस कम्युनिटी से आई हूँ वहाँ पे आज तक किसी को पता नहीं व्हाट इज मीडिया, जर्नलिस्ट, लेडी जर्नलिस्ट क्या है. उसमें मैंने पहल की कि मैं कुछ जर्नलिज्म करूँ. तब से शुरू होकर आज तक जो फेस की हूँ लगता है वो सारी चीज़ें यहाँ पे मैं फेस की हूँ. आज मुझे लग रहा है जब मैंने फर्स्ट जर्नलिज्म ज्वाइन की, घर में मना किए थे, घर छोड़ के मैं 2 साल की वो बाहर रह के, तभी मैंने जब यूनिवर्सिटी में गई तो पहली बार मुझे मेरे एक प्रोफेसर ने कहाँ से चले आते हैं जर्नलिस्ट बनने, क्योंकि मैं स्मॉल एक मिस्टेक किया था पेपर में. मेरे पास कोई नहीं थे पेरेंट्स साथ में, अकेली गई थी मेरा पेपर पकड़ के. तब से शुरू हो गया. मैं जब फर्स्ट ईयर ज्वाइन की डॉक्यूमेंट्री फिल्म मेकिंग में, मैं बहुत खुश थी कि कोई अच्छा गाइड मिला जो मुझे समझे, क्योंकि टोटली में मीडिया क्या है, थिएटर क्या होता है, स्टूडियो क्या होता है पता नहीं था. बुक्स में जो पढ़ी थी प्रैक्टिकल कुछ पता भी नहीं था. तो वहाँ पे उन्होंने हेल्प किया, तो मैंने 1 साल उन्हीं के साथ काम किया, तो कुछ कैमरा क्या है तो पता चला कुछ. सेकंड जब मैं मीडिया हाउस अभी जहाँ काम कर रही हूँ उसमें ज्वाइन की, तो मैंने बहुत होप था कि एक मैं बड़ी जगह जा रही हूँ गाँव से बिलोंग करके, जहाँ मीडिया जो है सबका. इसीलिए मैंने ज्वाइन किया क्योंकि मेरी कम्युनिटी को लोग अच्छे से रिस्पॉन्ड नहीं करते. जब मैं मीडिया में आऊँगी तो मेरा स्ट्रेंथ बढ़ेगा, लोग मुझे रिस्पॉन्ड करेंगे. उसी वजह से मैंने मीडिया ज्वाइन की थी. तो वो सोच लेके मैंने जब स्टूडियो वहाँ पे गई तो 6 मंथ मेरा ट्रेनिंग था. तो वहीं जाते ही सोचे कि बहुत पॉजिटिव थी, लेकिन शुरू हो गया मेरा स्टार्टिंग से. जब मेरे ग्रुप में न्यूज़ हेड एक थे, जब हम लोगों को क्लास लेते थे तो सभी हम लोग बैठे हुए थे, सबको पूछते हैं, बात करते, लेकिन मुझसे इग्नोर करते थे. तो मैं समझ में नहीं आता था क्या चल रहा है. वैसे धीरे धीरे बाद में सब मैं भी चलो कहीं लेके जाते तो वहाँ आप भी हो, तो इससे कंटिन्यू हुआ. जब भी मैं करती थी उसी टाइम से अलग सा माहौल जो मैंने कभी फेस नहीं की थी. ऐसा भी होता है क्या लड़की, और मुझे बोलते हैं अगर सर लोगों से मिलोगे नहीं, अच्छे से बात नहीं करोगे, बात में कैसे बात करना है फिर से. मुझे पता नहीं था सर, अलग से फोन में बात करना है, सब लोग अच्छे से फ्रीली मिलते, लेकिन मैंने कभी वो सब नहीं किया था, तो अच्छे नहीं लगता था. मैं किसी से ज़्यादा भी बात नहीं करती थी. तो इस वजह से जब मैंने कंप्लीट करने का था उसी टाइम मेरे जो सीनियर थे वही बोलते थे, मैं ऐसे कपड़े पहनते हो, तुम्हारा लैंग्वेज तो तुम ट्राइबल से बिलोंग करते हो, तुम ये लैंग्वेज यूज़ कर सकते हो. तो जाते वक्त जो सीनियर से उनसे कपड़े कैसे पहनना है सब पूछ के जाना, ऐसे भी बोले हैं. मैं गवर्नमेंट कर रही थी क्योंकि मैंने कभी रिजर्व नहीं किया था. जो लोग इतने बड़े बड़े ओहदे में हैं वो लोग ऐसा सोच रखते हैं. शायद मैं सोची मेरे में कुछ कमी होगा इसीलिए बोले हैं, अरे पॉजिटिव लेती थी. लेकिन जब मैं वहाँ रही तो देखी मेरे कॉलीग्स कुछ थे, उनके साथ जो इंसिडेंट हुआ मैं सोच में नहीं सकती थी ऐसा भी हो सकता है. मेरी एक फ्रेंड थी, वो जर्नलिस्ट रही थी लड़की, तो मुझे बहुत हेल्प करती थी. तो उन्हीं के साथ एक ऐसा इंसिडेंट हुआ कि हमारा एक कॉलीग्स रिपोर्टर था, उनका फ्रेंड ही थे साथ में. एक दिन नाइट में वो लोग पार्टी किए थे घर में, उसके साथ वो सेक्सुअली हरासमेंट उनको रेप शायद की. उसका पता जब चला ऑफिस में, सबने वो ऑफिस में बोलने के मैं नहीं बोले, वो मुझे शेयर किए. मैं बोला आप केस दे दो ऑफिस में बताओ. जब ऑफिस में वो शेयर किए तो उनको ऑफिस से निकाल दिए. उनका शादी होने वाला था, वो उनका ब्रेकअप हो गया, उनका शादी भी टूट गई. बहुत हुआ. मैंने सोच में ऐसा भी हो सकता है मीडिया हाउस में, अगर उनको क्यों सपोर्ट नहीं मिला. ऐसे क्या लॉ नहीं है, क्या बनाते नहीं है लड़की के लिए ऐसा कुछ. ऐसे बहुत सारे लड़कियों भी कुछ ऐसे नोटिस की तो कुछ केसेस में 2-3 उनको निकाल दिया. उसी टाइम मेरा कंप्लीट हो गया. मैं गाँव में चलिए, मुझे मलकानगिरी में नौकरी करना था, फिर रिपोर्टर करना है, मुझे टैक्स में काम नहीं करना है. तब से आज तक ऑफिस में फ्री नहीं हो पा रहे. शायद इसी वजह से मेरे स्टोरीज अच्छे से जाते नहीं है, कोई मुझसे फ्री नहीं हो पाता. क्योंकि मुझे बोलते हैं आप लोग सीनियर लोगों से अच्छे से मिलो, जब जाते हैं उनसे बचना नहीं लो बात करो, ऐसा क्या है? तो कुछ मेरा प्रॉब्लम से अगर आप लोग मुझे क्यों नहीं गाइड करते? आज तक नहीं। मैं बहुत डिप्रेशन रहती हूँ क्योंकि मेरे कॉलेज भी जो कि 50 की 60 नंबर्स है मेरे जिले में, ओनली मेल्स। बोलो मुझे कहते क्यों जाओ कॉलेज छोड़ दो। मुझे बेहरास लगता है कि शायद मैं कुछ अच्छे से नहीं कर रहा, कैसे करूँ? अगर स्टोरी बेचती हूँ ऑफिस में टोटली कोऑपरेट नहीं करते। मेरे साथ एक मेल मेरे सीनियर भी है, उनका स्टोरी जाता है, मेरा स्टोरी उनके नाम से भी जाता है। मेरा स्टोरी का फॉलो भी नहीं होता है। कभी 2 साल हो गया, 1 महीना और 1 कंटिन्यू मेल करते करते अब भी पूछते हैं तुम्हारा क्या प्रॉब्लम। जब बोलती है ऐसा प्रॉब्लम है तो कुछ नहीं करते, तो मुझे बोलना ही छोड़ते। लेकिन मेंटली डिप्रेशन कैसे काम करे? अगर मैं छोड़ दूंगी मेरे लिए बहुत सारा लॉस होगा। लोग मैं एक आइडेंटिटी बन गई हूँ, एक पहली लड़की। मुझे देख के बच्चे बोलते हैं आप क्या कर रहे हो, इसके लिए कॉस्ट है क्या, करना पड़ता है। इसलिए मैं छोड़ने भी नहीं चाहती, लेकिन इतना मेंटली डिप्रेस्ड हूँ। मैं ऑफिस से सैलरी भी ले रही हूँ, मुझे खुद को गिल्टी फील होती है कि मुझे पैसा ले रही हूँ, काम अच्छे से नहीं कर, क्योंकि खुद का कैमरा भी नहीं है। ऑफिस को बोल रही हूँ 2 साल हो गया कैमरा आज तक एफर्ट नहीं किए, उसके साथ ऐसे भी प्रेशर। ऑफिस में कोई भी हर बार जो भी सीनियर से सबसे मैं बोलती मेरा ये प्रॉब्लम है, लेकिन वो लोग टोटली कॉपरेट नहीं करते, अलग से इधर का उधर का प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट करते। तो मेंटली बहुत हरास हूँ। ऐसा है थिंग्स है, लेकिन मीडिया में आने के साथ ऐसा भी नहीं होगा सोची थी, लेकिन ऐसा भी चल रहा है। ऐसा कुछ रूल्स नहीं है क्या? जो भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में हो, लड़कियां हो, मैं कहते उनके लिए कुछ रेस्ट्रिक्शन है तो उन्हें पहले शायद बताना चाहिए, ऐसा होना चाहिए, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए।
Does anyone need a translation?
I think it would be better to translate.
So what Jayanti was trying to explain was that she's from Malkangiri, Odisha, and she's probably the first person from her village or from her community to kind of get into journalism. And she had to face a lot of resistance from within her family, while she was setting out. So what she's trying to say, she's very thrilled and excited about the opportunity to get into journalism, to report on her the issues that her community faces, or also get a name for the community, get a visibility for the community itself. And what she's trying to say is when she first started working and when she came for training to the bureau, there was a lot of awkwardness. She was not kind of treated as at par with the other people who were also a part of the training, 6-month training, and she would not even be acknowledged or spoken to. And whenever she tried to find out why exactly that was happening, or she tried to take it on herself to change her behavior, to see if she could add to her skills, or if there was something that she would have to do differently. But instead what was said was that you should learn how to speak freely with these seniors, you should know how to interact with these seniors, and you should know how to dress properly, you should ask your seniors how to dress in this setting, why are you speaking like this, and your language skills need to be improved, and those things like that. So they would keep she would keep getting this negative feedback, which made her feel very awkward about her place in that particular organization, and also media houses, as in she didn't think that this kind of experience would be what awaits her at a media house. And now that she's listening to these the accounts that we've heard so far, she realizes that a lot of what she faced was actually similar. It was colored in it was harassment, and it was colored with the remarks were colored with the same kind of judgment and lasciviousness. So she's just recounting how upset that left her, especially especially because she's taken this for her. Journalism is something very something she's fought for, and that she feels that she represents a community, and that she has the children in her community look up to her. They now know what journalism is. So she's brought a lot of light to journalism in her locality. But what she finds is that because of all these social these situations, this situation that has been created for her at the workplace, she feels very thwarted, because They don't give her feedback on her reports, or sometimes her reports are not carried in the paper, or sometimes they're even carried in the names of the males who work. And most of the people in her district, they're all men. Not most. She's the only woman who's working there. So she says that she wasn't aware that this is actually a structural problem. Like, that this is actually something that other women also face, and that people go through in other centers. So for her, it's that realization and that feeling that, oh God, I know what you're going through, because I'm going through the same thing. And she mentioned that she's very depressed at this whole, because she's been in journalism for 3 years now, and she's been at this organization for 2 years, and they don't even provide her the resources, training, feedback. These are structural things. They don't provide her those things. So she feels that she's not learning anything.
And on the other hand, she's feeling guilty.
Yeah.
She's feeling guilty that she's taking a salary but is not able to do what it takes.
So this needless guilt is what is eating into her right now, and she's feeling quite depressed, as she said, at this entire chain of events.
For filing the complaint.
Yeah. So yeah.
जयंती जी, आपने जो बोला, सॉरी मुझे बहुत इमोशनल बना दिया, आई अपोलोजाइज फॉर दैट, बट मैं आपसे कुछ बोलना चाहती हूँ। मेरा एक लॉ डिग्री है और मैंने वो 5 साल का कोर्स किया है लॉ का, और उन 5 साल में मेरे साथ बहुत कुछ हुआ, इंटर्नशिप में, कॉलेज में। एंड जिस दिन मैं कॉलेज छोड़ी, उस दिन मैंने डिसाइड किया कि मैं लॉ नहीं करूँगी। मुझ में उतना ताकत नहीं है जितना आप में है। मैं अभी स्पीचलेस हूँ, मुझे पता नहीं क्या बोलूँ, बट ऑनेस्टली मैं रिफ्लेक्ट करके आपके लिए कुछ करना चाहती हूँ। अगर आप इजाज़त दो तो आपका कॉन्टैक्ट में इन सबसे किसी से ले लूँगी, आपसे बात करना चाहती हूँ, आपके लिए मैं कुछ करना चाहती हूँ। अभी आई फील अ लिटिल ब्लैंक, मुझे पता नहीं क्या कर सकती हूँ, क्या करना चाहती हूँ, लेकिन मैं ज़रूर आपके लिए कुछ करना चाहती हूँ। जितना मेरे हाथ में है मैं करना चाहती हूँ। Thank you for who you are.
Is there any other question? We are done, right? Thank you, everyone. This is obviously a very personal session for all of us, and obviously this is just a beginning. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'd like to. Yeah. Sit down.
Thank you.
I don't know what you're. Stay. Padma. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for sharing.